Welcome to beautiful Glens Falls, New York. Look magazine in 1944 called it Hometown USA, and it kind of stuck, and they kind of lived by it. Glens Falls was named after Colonel Johannes Glenn, and the falls came from the falls in the river. Here's another fun fact. Glens Falls is considered the safest city in the USA 2 years running. Glens Falls is located halfway between Fort Edward and Fort William Henry. So, it was a very important place during the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War. There were several battles had here. And the old fort is still around, but it's a couple towns over. We'll take a look a little later. To put it in perspective, it's in between Lake George and Saratoga. So Fort William Henry and the Battle of Saratoga. Glens Falls is located directly in between those two. Glens Falls is located right on the Hudson River. Its claim to fame is the logging industry. And as you can see here, it's still vibrant and still trucking. No pun intended. Glens Falls was ravaged by fire 5 times between the years 1783 and 1902. Completely eradicated the city twice, coming back stronger every time. We're going to get down on the ground soon and really understand some history of Glens Falls. In the meantime, as we round the bend here, take a good look at the Hudson River, the mountains in the background, the lush landscape. Think about what it made it look like to the first settlers. Here's a look at the canal system that was built for the logging industry. They would bottleneck the lumber here into the canal to bypass the falls and make its way downriver towards Hudson Falls and eventually to Troy in Albany, New York. The original name of Glens Falls was first called Corners and then Wings Falls. Legend has it, Colonel Glenn, he won the land from Mr. Wings in a card game. We're going to take a look at the DeLong House, which is located here in the Chapman Museum. The house was donated to the Historical Association after Mr. DeLong had passed away, and Miss DeLong donated the house. Now let's take a second and reflect on that beautiful image of the river, and now what it looked like during the big boom. The paper mill we saw on the edge of the Hudson, that's Finch paper. They've been there for a very long time, and they're the #1 provider for the town from a tax and revenue perspective. So the lumber business is still extremely important in Glens Falls. Here's a look at early downtown Glens Falls and the actual cash register from that store. Pretty cool. They have their own telephone company. Here's remnants of that. When speaking to the museum curator, she was excited to tell me about these sewing machines. She was the last person to ever use these machines and create some clothing as they did back in the day. She said Glens Falls was a big deal in creating clothes, high-end clothes, Neiman Marcus type clothes, she said. Modern Glens Falls is now, but in the 50s, it was modern compared to the early 1900s and the 80s. But look how bustling this town was in the 50s. Here's a look at what life would have looked like in the DeLong house in the early 1900s. How about a random lumber fun fact? Sure, why not? 1870. The expansion of the railroad? Well, 39 million railroad ties were made out of lumber that came through Glens Falls. Pretty interesting. Enough looking around indoors. Let's get back outside and have some fun. So the Hudson wasn't just used for lumber. Well, it's also used for electricity. So there is an electric plant here on the falls that's running and delivers electricity to the area. Here's a fun fact about these falls. Have you heard of the movie Last of the Mohegans? Well, that story was based on these falls. Pretty cool. Here we showcase the effects of the Hudson River on Glens Falls. On the right, we have a power plant, and on the left, we have a paper mill. Here we have the Civil War Monument. It was dedicated in 1872 to honor the 644 men from the area who served in the Civil War. 95 names, those of men who died, are engraved on the monument. Many battles of war are listed on the monument as well. This is a model of the original fort that stood in Glens Falls. It's now been moved and rebuilt in Fort Anne, New York, a couple towns over. And it's now a bank. I was advised by the museum curator that this was the oldest house in Glens Falls, standing since the 17th century, through multiple fires, and currently being rebuilt as it stands today. I could not find any research or evidence to back up these claims. Glens Falls has plenty of churches, 13 to be exact. And with that said, they are beautiful structures, so if ever visiting, take your time to check them out. Here we have the Crandall Public Library. It was built in 1893 and expanded over the years. I tell you, it's got to be one of the biggest libraries I've ever seen. Glens Falls was also famous for its banks, its insurance companies, and its hospital, because it was the hub for all the surrounding towns. Not only did the lumber industry transform the neighboring towns like Fort Edward, Corinth, and Warrensburg, but these areas around here all visited Glens Falls for their banking, their insurance, and any medical needs. Let's take a walk downtown, get a little flavor, and take a look at some of these places, because they're still here. From an arts perspective, we have the Wood Theater. There's also a few museums, an arts council, and the Glens Falls Symphony. Here's the local Catholic church, St. Mary's. Just celebrated their 150-year anniversary. Pretty awesome. They also have a Catholic school across the street, which is still in service and thriving today. Here's a look at Glens Falls Town Hall. Well, it was originally built in 1862, but like I said earlier, it burnt down a couple times, was rebuilt, but some of the foundation is still there. It still captures the charm of the area. Here we feature Morgan & Company, which is a restaurant, a very prominent restaurant here in downtown Glens Falls. Folks seem to love it. I like the architecture. Sports are part of the fabric here in Glens Falls, or should I say ice, because hockey's a big deal, and they have their own arena. History is interesting. It allows you to reflect on the past and sit back and take in the beauty around you. This is something new in Glens Falls. They're doing a lot of murals. This one is awesome because it really does represent the area. There is a balloon fest here every year. The big boom brought lumber to Glens Falls, right straight to their sawmills. Well, it's still doing it today, and it's the number one contributor of the economy. The lumber just don't move by water anymore. It's now by truck. When you look around, you always find some interesting architecture, and I truly enjoy this building. It's pretty cool. The number 2 contributor to the economy here is Glens Falls Hospital and some other medical field things in the area. But this place is huge, and it services everything north of Saratoga. Glens Falls, to date, is still under revitalization, so more to come. We're going to build it, make it great. You heard me mention Fort Edward a couple times. Well, that's where the train station is. It's also where the old feeder canal ends from Glens Falls. They have their own paper mill here too, and lumber is still a big deal, so history lives on. From the battles to the lumber to the fires, we've learned a lot about Glens Falls. It's a very beautiful town, and it truly is hometown USA. But never forget what the Hudson River, did to bring that to life.